In the Wasteland, just existing is the definition of survival, but the vaults also have survivors. We are talking about the ones who aren't protagonists. We are talking about all those vault dwellers that you don't see again after the first hours, or don't exist anymore when you come back. Let's start with the survivor who proves Vault 13's purity was always a joke. Talius, Lost Scout, Mutant, Scholar. When people say Vault 13, they're usually thinking in big mythic terms. The Vault Dweller, the Water Chip. You know the rest by now. But here's what a lot of people forget. Vault 13 didn't just send out one person. They sent out many. Some didn't even make it past the front door, such as Ed, who is dead. Talius is one of the most brutal examples of what happens when a vault tries to interact with the Wasteland without understanding it. Talius was one of the first to get sent out to search for a water chip replacement weeks or months before the Vault Dweller was sent out, and if you know Fallout 1's world, you already know that's basically the same as being told to go walk into the desert and see which nightmare puts you to death first. Talius doesn't just get robbed or mauled by rad scorpions, he gets captured by the forces tied to the Master's whole Unity mess, and then he's exposed to FEV. After all, he's a prime normal, something the Master has very few of, and the more he has, the better. Certainly better than becoming an Abby normal, as super mutants like Harry tend to turn out. Now, normally, that's the end of the story. Yearns being dipped in FEV is when you're transformed into a super mutant, and the game starts using you as an enemy for the protagonist to kill in a combat encounter. But Talius is different. He survives the transformation with his mind intact, but not as a super mutant, but as what can only be described as a ghoulish appearance, which is already horrifying, because that means he's fully aware of what happened to him. He remembers being human. He remembers being from Vault 13, but what happened to his mind scatters it, makes him far more intelligent in some areas, but reduces his awareness in others. To the Wasteland, he's just another ghoul freak from Necropolis, or a similarly dead city. But to Talius, now he's in a new body that the Wasteland will more than likely treat as no different than a homeless person, and with the worst of humanity now designating him as something to kill on sight. So what does he do? He heads to the only other city of the dead, the Boneyard, and ends up with the followers of the Apocalypse, living under the Boneyard Library like some underground historian mutant professor. It's one of those moments where, underneath the satire and violence, Fallout quietly shows that it's smarter than it looks. Vault 13, as Fallout 2 would later show, tried to create pure, preserved humanity, but the first Vault 13 survivor we're talking about went out into the Wasteland and became a symbol of the opposite. He survives by adapting. Not physically, after all. He didn't choose to get kidnapped or be dipped in FEV, but Talius adapted mentally. He becomes useful in a world that doesn't care who he used to be. With the followers. Being the followers are one of the only groups that would even tolerate him long enough to allow him to spread his warnings. Because Talius isn't just a survivor. He's a messenger. He's a guy who saw the inside of Vault life, stepped out into the Wasteland, got swallowed by it by being forcibly thrown into the machine that is the Unity, and came out the other side with his sanity relatively intact, enough to coherently realize that the outside world isn't simply random chaos. There's something organizing this horror. That's a terrifying kind of survival. Not the idea of simply making it out. That's the easy part. The hard part is the idea that you made it out, and now you know too much. And if you think Talius is a nightmare case because he got dragged into the Master's mess, the next story is scarier in a quieter way, because it's about Vault survivors who choose to leave, and then history just loses them. Teresa and Lyle, Vault walkouts. So here's what happens after Fallout 1's main story ends, and the Vault Dweller comes back to Vault 13. They got the chip, stopped the Master, and prevented a future where humanity gets unified into something unrecognizable. Yet it's how Vault 13's leader responds that makes this impactful, with what might be the most Fallout thing ever. The Overseer exiles the Vault Dweller. Why? Because they're afraid. They're afraid of what the Vault Dweller has become. Not by themselves, but for their leadership. He thinks that the Wasteland changed them too much, tainting them, giving the Vault 13 residents the idea to leave. If he lets the Vault Dweller back inside, they'll bring danger back home. And the moment the Vault 13 Overseer does that, it reveals what Vault-Tech's idea of preservation actually created. Not safety, but paranoia. A bunker mentality so deep it becomes self-destructive. Wonder where we'll hear that sentiment echoed. The Enclave, perhaps? Anyway, this is where Teresa and Lyle come in. Some dwellers see the Vault Dweller get cast out and think to themselves that it's insane. They then decide to make a plan to leave too. They basically perform a quiet rebellion, not by staging a coup or by blowing the door open, just by walking out and choosing the Wasteland over Vault leadership, which is an unbelievably hard thing to do if you think about it, because the Vault isn't just a place, it's an identity. You belong to it. You are the Vault. It's your entire definition of what has been normal to you for your entire life. So to leave it means you're willingly stepping into a world of unknown rules, unknown dangers, and unknown futures. But what exactly happens to Teresa and Lyle. We don't return to Vault 13 until almost 100 years later in Fallout 2. Simply put, we don't get a clean answer. They just disappear into the wasteland. The most we hear is that eventually, Vault 13's citizens rebelled against the Overseer and either put them to death or exiled them. But Teresa and Lyle are gone. In these types of situations, they could have become legends after all. Fallout loves legends. But the wasteland is full of people who don't become legends. These two were some of them. That's one of the most chilling pieces of Vault lore in the entire franchise, because it's so realistic. People who leave a vault and die in a ditch because they didn't know that a supposedly friendly man offering water in one hand and a knife behind his back in the other was a raider tactic. Or people who leave and survive, but fade into the background of history because they don't do anything cinematic enough for a game quest to latch onto them. Teresa and Lyle represent the invisible majority of Vault survivors, the ones who make it out and become just another wasteland story someone tells once. Their story makes Vault 13 even darker. It lost confidence, it lost citizens, and it lost the illusion that the Vault was the best possible life. So their survival isn't heroic. It's a rupture, a crack in the preservation experiment. Speaking of crack, imagine living underground your whole life, finally seeing the sun, and then immediately realizing you don't have any outside skills besides maintenance and unquestionably following an overseer until recently. Congrats. Your resume boils down to the ability to fix air filters and being emotionally scarred. If Teresa and Lyle represent survival as disappearance, the next person represents the opposite, surviving by walking into a dead vault and trying to stop its infection from ever escaping. Keely, the Vault walk-in. Okay, Vault 22. Where to begin? Vault 22 is one of those vaults where the experiment writes itself. The typical buzzwords of performing agricultural research, improving food production, generating sustainability for future generations. And then you walk up to a door that's more green and leafy than the standard Vault-Tec rust and metal, and realize sustainability instead means that the plants now own the building. Vault 22 doesn't just fail, it becomes a biological horror story. Keely is what happens when someone from the outside tries to investigate it, and ends up surviving inside it longer than anyone sane should. Keely is tied to the NCR's very haphazard and mismanaged scientific apparatus. She's a freelance scientist, and she goes into Vault 22 to recover data that will allegedly assist with the NCR's so-called famine predictions, though the man she does it for is far from anyone trustworthy, let alone scientific. The NCR is a government trying to rebuild the world using the scraps of the old one, and Vault data is basically the holy grail of what went wrong, and in the right hands gives an idea of what they could salvage. The problem is, Vault 22's data is anything but neutral. Vault 22's research became a contagion. The spores, the plant-human hybrid nightmares, and ultimately the fact that the Vault started turning people into hosts. So, when Keely survives long enough inside this place to understand what happened, she hits the moment that defines her as a Vault survivor in a unique way. She stops thinking like a scientist chasing discovery, and starts thinking like a person trying to keep a disaster from happening again. Keely's survival becomes a moral problem, because if she brings the data back, that means the NCR or someone else might try to replicate the experiment. They might weaponize it, accidentally recreate it, or sell it, fully aware of what it does and can do. Fallout is full of factions that would absolutely love a biological lever like that. So Keely becomes one of the rare survivors who looks at valuable information and instead decides that the best option is the simplest one. Burn it, destroy it, toss it down the drain. And if you've ever been in any fandom argument where people are arguing that knowledge should always be preserved, Keely is Fallout walking in and giving the best counterpoint. Here's knowledge that killed everyone. Do you still feel like continuing? That's what makes her survival interesting. It's not just the basic idea that Keely lived, as impressive as her survival is. It's that she lived long enough to make a call that motivates changes to what the wasteland can become, assuming the Courier agrees with her, and isn't simply anti-NCR, or is only in it for the money. That's something Vault survivors almost never get. Agency. Most Vault survivors are shaped by the Vault's experiment. Keely survives by refusing to let the Vault shape the future again. It's also ironic that Keely is basically one of the only Fallout scientists who reacts to horrifying pre-war research with the correct response of immediately desiring to destroy or delete it. Meanwhile, every other scientist, including the one she works for, instead asks, what if we did it again, but with more funding? What could possibly go wrong? You might be thinking that Keely is already intense because she chooses destruction, but wait until we meet the Overseer who survived for 2 centuries and then tries to restart the experiment like she's reopening a restaurant. Valerie Barstow, overseeing the experiment. Vault 88 is a weird vault because it's not a complete vault. Yeah, it's this huge unfinished project buried under the Commonwealth, and the way it's presented makes it feel like Vault-Tec built a playground and then the apocalypse happened before the slides were installed. Kind of a common trend in Fallouts from the Bethesda era. And in Vault-Tec Workshop, you meet Overseer Valerie Barstow through a 210-year-old radio beacon tuned to Vault-Tec Pip-Boys only, something that's That's not exactly common out in the wastelands of Boston. Barstow is a vault survivor in a very specific way. She survives as a ghoul for over 200 years. Not that she exactly knows what one is, only that she is one. In spite of her condition, she's not just a relic. She's a continuation. She is the Vault-Tec mentality that outlived Vault-Tec itself. And when you meet her, she's not grateful to be alive, nor reflective. She immediately returns to what she knows. After all, she was supposed to run the experiments. Vault 88 was designed to test prototypes, to see how people respond to different levels of manipulation, to measure efficiency, compliance, and habit formation. Barstow is still on that same wavelength that led to Vault-Tec's immoral and unethical experiments to begin with, albeit with a far less amount of loss of life or gruesome games. So when the sole survivor shows up, she sees you as a resource, not a person. A resource. And she sees the settlers you can bring in as test subjects. That right there is why Barstow is so important as a Vault survivor. She proves that survival doesn't equal humanity. Some people survive and become wiser. Barstow survives and becomes more committed to the ideology that doomed everyone. However, because she's not just a ghoul survivor of the apocalypse, she's a survivor of a corporate system that trained her to see people as data, so her survival becomes an extension of the Vault's purpose. She sends you to fetch the experiment data from the nearby Vault-Tec regional HQ in order to have you do what she thinks will be the completion of 210-year overdue experimentations. But ultimately, Fallout 4 lets you decide how her story ends. Do you help her? Enable her? Compromise with her? Or do you simply reject her and her immoral ways? That's the fascinating part. With Barstow, the player can become the moral gatekeeper for whether a Vault survivor gets to keep being Vault-Tec. If you do Vault-Tec things, she stays. If you do normal, insane things, she leaves. And if you think that's just a boring side quest sold as a DLC, it's not. Not fully, at least. It's a thesis statement. Because Fallout 4 is basically asking, after the apocalypse, who keeps the old world alive? Barstow is one possible answer. The people who refuse to let the old world die. Not because it was good, but because it gave them power. Barstow surviving 200 years as a ghoul just to immediately desire the resumption of testing on innocent people is the most corporate behavior imaginable. She's basically HR, but with radiation and a clipboard. Now, if Barstow is the kind of Vault survivor who uses the past to control the present, Vault 34 gives us the opposite. Survivors who don't control anything. Survivors who are basically just trapped behind a door while the world rots around them. Vault 34. The Holdouts. Vault 34 is one of the best examples of Fallout doing horror without trying too hard. You don't need a cinematic villain. You don't need a speech. You just need a place where the lights still flicker and the air feels wrong. Vault 34's meltdown turns most residents into ghouls. Feral ghouls, specifically. Sit down with what for a moment and think about what that means for the survivors. Not the ones who turned into the gun-toting boomers, the normal people. Because surviving a Vault reactor meltdown isn't like surviving a car crash. It's like surviving while your neighbors slowly turn into predators that used to be people. And Horowitz is one of the last surviving non-ghouls. He's trapped in the lower sections alongside a few other human holdouts, people who survive because they're sealed away from the worst of it. And the story behind that sealing is the kind of detail Fallout uses to make you feel sick without even showing you the whole incident. A bomb was detonated in the vault, in the pool area, which sealed off the lower levels. So the survivors survived because a door slammed shut at the right time. Not because they were stronger or because they were smarter. It was because they were lucky. That's Vault survival in its purest form. Due to the sheer luck of the situation, Horowitz becomes this representation of what survival looks like as the long, arduous task of simply waiting for someone to open the door, waiting for rescue that might never come, listening to the vault above you fill with ferals. As the song goes, the waiting is the hardest part. The unnamed human survivors with him matter too. Because Fallout loves doing this thing where it gives you survivors, but doesn't give you the comfort of knowing them as people. They're not given names or intricate details. They're background NPCs. They're just the remaining humans you get to save, which is exactly how the Wasteland would categorize them. Not as individuals, but as a statistic. Another group wandering around, still alive, even if ultimately aimless. In spite of that, it's what makes Vault 34's survivors hit so hard, being given the moral choice it creates in the player's head. Do you save them? Do you even try to? Because the Vault is dangerous enough that saving them, in a situation where you're dealing with a labyrinth of floods, radiation, armored ghouls, and automated security. Yeah, it can feel like risking your life for what amounts to nothing more than a couple strangers for nothing more than goodwill. But it's because of that in which Fallout is always testing whether you behave like a protagonist or like a person. Vault 34's holdouts are the kind of survivors who remind you. Most Vault survivors weren't heroes. They were just trapped people waiting for someone to care. Vault 34 is proof that the worst thing in the Wasteland isn't Deathclaws, it's bad facility management. No one needs an entire floor devoted to a giant pool, let alone at the cost of living space. Somewhere, an engineer is screaming from beyond the grave, or rather losing what little sanity he has left. left. Now that we've done survival as imprisonment, let's pivot hard into something different. Survival as stupidity with confidence. Because Fallout 3 gives us a vault survivor who escapes Vault 101 and learns exactly 0 lessons from it. Wally Mack, the Tunnel Snake. Wally Mack is one of those characters who seems like background flavor until you realize, oh, he actually survived. And he keeps doing exactly what it was he was doing before he left. Wally is a Vault 101 kid, part of the Tunnel Snakes. But Vault 101 is a special kind of vault because it's not just sealed, it's socially sealed. It's an isolated micro-society where the overseer can control information, control movement, control the narrative. So when you leave Vault 101, you're not just leaving a building, you're leaving an ideology. Some people adapt well, like Butch Deloria and Amada. Wally does not. Wally leaves Vault 101 and still tries to live like he's in the Tunnel Snakes. He ends up in the Commonwealth, trying to restart the gang. I love this because it's such a vault survivor realism detail. Not everybody who leaves a vault becomes a wise wasteland survivor. Some people leave and immediately latch onto the only identity they've ever had. Wally survives by turning vault culture into wasteland culture. He tries to make the Tunnel Snakes a real thing. And then there's the moment that makes me want to grab him by the shoulders and shake him. They discover radioactive waste barrels where they're setting up. Wally's vibe is basically the idea that maybe radiation gives them superpowers, like it's an issue of Tesla Science magazine. Brother, you grew up in a vault with posters explaining radiation safety. You have no excuse to be this unaware. Wally is the vault survivor who proves survival doesn't equal competence. Sometimes survival equals simply not dying yet, and that has made him arrogant. And there's something almost tragic about him, because you can see the vault kid mentality in him. It has been almost 10 years, yet he treats the outside world like it's a bigger vault, like it has rules that can be bullied into place. A high school jock who never grew up, but the wasteland doesn't care about your Tunnel Snake jacket. The wasteland eats people like you. So Wally surviving long enough to make it to the Commonwealth is unironically impressive. He's like a cockroach with an attitude, and the reason he's worth including is because he represents a type of vault survivor nobody respects. The ones who survive but never mature. They survive physically, but mentally they're still inside the vault, still playing high school politics in a world that runs on bullets. Wally pays the price, not by becoming a comic book character, but by suffering in a world he could have continued to survive in, but didn't. We've seen a vault survivor become a mutant scholar. We've seen walkouts vanish. We've seen scientists destroy data. We've seen an overseer try to restart the experiment. We've seen trapped holdouts praying behind a door. We've seen a Tunnel Snake take his brain damage on tour. Now we need to talk about a vault survivor who represents something else entirely. The state, the military, authority trying to keep control when vault survival turns into a regional catastrophe. James Oberlin, authority overall. Vault 63 is a modern vault story, but it has classic Fallout bones. Big Vault, non-standard megacorporate influence. The idea that this was supposed to be science. And the classic oops, it went horribly right. Lieutenant Colonel James Oberlin is the kind of vault survivor Fallout doesn't always highlight. He's not a dweller born into vault culture. He's a military presence, a liaison and security figure. He's there to justify something, oversee something, keep something controlled. And that matters because it reveals a side of Vault-Tech's world people forget. The pre-war government, not just the Enclave Shadow Cabal, didn't just tolerate Vault-Tech. It partnered with it. It inserted itself into these projects. So when the bombs fall and Vault 63 becomes a long-term survival scenario, Oberlin survives into the post-war era as a ghoul, and his story becomes this tight knot of authority and disaster management. Yeah, because Vault 63 doesn't just fail, it becomes a contested space where one man, Hugo Stoltz, wants to keep pushing the Atlas device and basically rewrite reality in the name of preventing feralization. Oberlin becomes the counterweight. He's the guy saying to stop that, this is unstable, this is dangerous. We are not doing this again. Fallout loves this conflict because it mirrors real-world disaster logic. The people who caused the catastrophe always want to fix it with the same mindset that caused it. Hugo's mindset is business, logic, control, urgency. Oberlin's mindset is containment, procedure, chain of command, risk mitigation. Hugo comes off as friendly, but ultimately manipulative. Oberlin is strict and stern, but has everyone's well-being in mind. But one is far less catastrophic than the other. So Oberlin survives long enough to do what a lot of Vault survivors can't do. He attempts to impose limits. That's huge in the Vault context, because Vaults are often designed to impose limitations from and for Vault-Tech. Vaults are built as experiments. They're built to push people until something breaks. So when Oberlin survives and tries to stop the pushing, he becomes an accidental rebellion against the Vault's core nature. If you zoom out, Oberlin represents a broader Fallout theme. Sometimes the survivor isn't the one who escapes. It's the one who stays long enough to become the guardrail, the person trying to stop the apocalypse from having a sequel. Because the Vault 63 storyline can branch depending on how things play out, Oberlin's survival impact is partially defined by whether you, the player, let him be the guardrail or let the Vault's worst impulses win again. Oberlin is basically the only Fallout military character who reacts to a prototype super device malfunctioning with the correct response. exists. We are not touching that again. Meanwhile, Hugo is like, okay, but what if we touch it again? Maybe it'll be different this time? This has been every single Vault survivor in Fallout Explained. If you want to see every supernatural mystery in Fallout 4 explained, click the video on the screen.